begin by acknowledging the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. As I offer my brief remarks, please go ahead and enjoy your salads. Don't wait to eat. As you may know, the Pearson Centre was founded 11 years ago. As a progressive think tank, we bring together people and ideas together in search of good public policy. We are the only think tank that regularly brings together elected representatives from all parties with business, labor, NGOs, and other concerned Canadians. We like to say, rather than being nonpartisan, we're multi-partisan. For those of you who may not have heard, like I said, I've taken over the role as the chair. I would be remiss if I didn't thank our past chair, Dr. Karen Mock. Yeah. Here. Beyond being an Order of Canada recipient and a lifelong career dedicated to promoting equality, diversity, and inclusion, Karen is recognized by the Canadian courts and the Human Rights Tribunal as an expert on racism, anti-Semitism, and hate crime, lessons we all need very well these days. Received several awards and honors for her work. Karen is unable to join us tonight due to an illness, but I did want to make sure that we thanked her profusely for her work with the Pearson Centre. A few of our other board members are here tonight. I'd like to point them out, if I could. Our vice chair and moderator of the evening is Indira Naidu-Harris. Where are you, Indira? Great, thank you. And I'd also like to point out and have them stand up if they wouldn't mind. Catherine Cotris, who is also one of the organizers of this dinner. Right, yeah. And Alex Lantier with PAA is here as well. Hello, Alex. Great, thank you. Yeah. And we are really pleased to have so many of you who are able to join us this evening as we salute organized labor and its leadership for their pioneering efforts in creating positive and progressive social change. The Pearson Centre is delighted to be honoring 4 amazing Canadian labor leaders as we salute organized labor across the country. I'm going to name our honorees in alphabetical order and ask them to stand and be acknowledged. Right here. Great, thank you. Dave Bulmer, President and CEO of AMAPSIO, Ontario's Professional Employees Union. Go. Yeah. Renee Jansen Indewal, President of the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association. Linda Silas, President of the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions. And finally, Sean Strickland, Executive Director of the Canadian Building Trades Union. I'd like to turn the evening over to our co-chairs, Carmen Santoro, the Assistant to the General President for the Canadian Operations of the International Association of Firefighters, and Marva Bailey Wisdom, Order of Ontario recipient and Senior Fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy at the University of Toronto. We are very pleased to have them be able to lead us here tonight. Let me mention a few things for their bio. On October 1st, Carmen was appointed as International Association of Firefighters Assistant to the General President for Canadian Operations, an Oakville firefighter who retired with the rank of captain. Carmen served more recently as the IAFF Senior Executive for Eastern Canada. Previously, he served as President of the Oakville Professional Firefighters Association for almost 20 years and 4 years as President of the Ontario Professional Firefighters Association. On Marva, in addition to her position at the Monk School, Marva is a fellow of the Environics Institute and Outreach Director for the Black Experience Project. She was awarded the Order of Ontario for her leadership in helping to transform inclusion and belonging and the Black experience in Ontario. Marva co-chaired 2 federal election platform committees. She is President-elect of the Rotary Club of Guelph, founding President of the Kensington Market Jazz Festival, Director of the International Arts Everywhere Festival, which focuses on the climate change, climate crisis, indigeneity, and equity. Through her consultancy, Marva provides invaluable insights into enhancing equity, inclusion, and belonging that have shaped fundamental policies and initiatives across the public and private sectors. One more thing before I turn it over to Marva and Carmen. Beyond being chair of the Pearson Center, I also have a side hustle on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Polylego. I create political vignettes in Lego. And before I got up here tonight, I tweeted our 4 laureates in Lego. So, so go online, check your, I've tagged your organizations, but before you leave tonight, make sure you get yourself in Lego. Okay? With that, I'll turn it over to Carmen and Marva. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kevin. We're delighted to co-chair the Pearson Center Leadership Awards dinner this evening, saluting organized labor groups across Canada and 4 outstanding labor leaders. We celebrate tonight with those leaders, the labor unions, and their supporters. We salute all of you in your role in building better communities and making Canada a better place. Thank you so much. Marva?
Thank you, Carmen. It's wonderful to meet you and all the work that you've done on our behalf. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It is my pleasure to acknowledge and thank the sponsors of tonight's event. Our sponsors are listed in the program and on the screens right in front of us here. And I'm going to ask you to hold your applause until I've finished the list, if you don't mind. The sustaining sponsor this evening is AMOPSEO, that's the Ontario Professional Employees Union. Our platinum sponsors are Bruce Power, and I had a chance to meet a member of Bruce Power there earlier on, and CBTU, the Canadian Building Trades Union. Our gold sponsor is Sandstone Group. Our silver sponsor is OECTA, Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association. And our bronze sponsors are Baylis Medical Technologies, PAA Advisory. I needed to look that up because I always have a thing about acronym. So I looked it up and it read the National Public Affairs and Strategy in Communication Firm, just so that everybody knows. And then Smart Union, that's the International Association of Sheet, Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation. Thank you all for your generous support of the Pearson Center. Please give them a thunderous round of applause. And thank you also to those who provide us with your support individually. All of you are friends and supporters of progressive policy. Thank you for being here. The Pearson Center is able to do its work to advance good public policy because all of the generous partners and individual supporters who are here tonight and some who may not have been able to be here, but support us nonetheless. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you, Marva. I want to take a moment to introduce some special guests who are with us here tonight. There are a number of them, so I please ask you to hold your applause until the end. Don Valley West MPP, Dr. Adil Shamji, Kingston and Islands MPP, Ted Hsu, Ottawa South MPP, John Fraser, Richmond Hill Mayor, His Worship David Hill, Toronto's Ward 2 Councillor, Josh Matlow, former Ontario Premier and former Ontario Deputy Premier and former Health Minister George Smitherman, former Minister of Education and Minister of Women's Issues Indira Naidoo-Harris, another former Minister of Education and former MP Gerard Kennedy, Ontario Liberal Party President and former Minister, former Mayor of Cambridge Catherine McGarry, Ontario Liberal Party candidates Lee Farclow, Alison Gohal, Galen Nadeau-Harris, and Vince Gasparo. We are also very pleased to have with us Dr. James Orbinski, author, principal of Massey College, and former head of Doctors Without Borders when the organization received the Nobel Peace Prize. Michael Adams, author, co-founder of an Environics group of companies and founder and president of the Environics Institute for Survey Research. And again tonight, we are joined by a group of legislative interns who work with MPPs from all parties at Queen's Park. Please welcome them all. To all of our special guests, thank you very much for your service to Canada. We'll be back in a few minutes with the presentations and a special panel discussion with Indira. Enjoy your meal. We hope you enjoyed your meal. Now is the time for our main attraction of the evening. We're going to call on our honorees this evening to come up and accept their awards and take a seat up here for the panel discussion. Dave Ballmer is the President and CEO of AMEPSIO, Ontario Professional Employees Union. Prior to his election as President and CEO in 2015, Dave served the term as Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer and 2 terms as Board Chair. Mr. Ballmer is a member of the Ontario Pension Board and lectures at Industrial Relations at several Ontario universities. He is a frequent panelist at union, human resources, labor relations, academic, and think tank events. AMEPSIO is a member-driven, politically nonpartisan union of more than 16,500 professional employees dedicated to providing outstanding representation and other services to its members. Please welcome Dave. Our next honoree is Renee Jansen Indewal, is President of the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association, OECTA. Throughout his nearly 40-year career, Renee has maintained a passion for education and advocacy. In addition to his work in the classroom, he has dedicated himself to protecting and expanding the rights of Catholic teachers. Renee's teaching career began as a secondary school teacher in 1986, working tirelessly for students inside the classroom, as well as for Catholic teachers at the bargaining tables and working groups across the province. As a teacher, Renee has been honored with several awards, including the Toronto Sun's Teacher of the Year. He received the Prime Minister Letter of Recognition for Teaching and a Best Practices Award from the Toronto Catholic District School Board. OECTA is the professional association of almost 45,000 Catholic teachers in Ontario. It advocates for the welfare of teachers and students, promotes Catholic education principles, and supports several social, economic, and economic justice. Please welcome Renee.
And I have the pleasure of introducing our other 2 awardees. Linda Silas has been the president of the 250,000 member strong Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions since 2003. As a dynamic and charismatic leader of Canada's largest nurses organization, Linda is recognized as the foremost advocate on behalf of nurses in Canada. A proud New Brunswicker, they're everywhere. Linda has earned a reputation for being a caring listener who is focused and solution-oriented in everything she does. The Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions, CFNU, is Canada's largest nurses organization, representing frontline unionized nurses and nursing students in every sector of healthcare. from home care and long-term care to community and acute care, and advocating on key priorities to strengthen public health and public health care across the country. Please welcome Linda to the stage. Are we giving them the... We'll hand them their awards in just a moment. And now Sean Strickland, probably one of those names that a lot of people are familiar with as well, serves as the Executive Director of Canada's Building Trades Unions, drawing on more than 40 years of experience in the construction industry. Sean started his career in the field with Luna and as a bricklayer's laborer at age 15. How many people have teenagers in here? He was raised in a construction union household where his father was a business manager for Bricklayers Local 12 in Kitchener. Canada's Building Trades Unions is the national voice of more than 600,000 Canadian skilled trades construction workers, members of 14 international unions who work in more than 60 different trades and occupations, generating 6% of Canada's GDP. Since 1908, their members have built the roads, the bridges, the dams, the factories, the hospitals, schools, and green projects that benefit communities and Canadians from coast to coast. Please welcome Sean Strickland. Yes. I think we're going to try to do some photos. I think there's a photographer here.
We'll start with Sean. Congratulations. Thank you. We'll start with me? Yeah, we're going to start with you. Okay,
We'll go over here.
Okay. Yeah.
So we take a picture?
There you go. We'll take a quick photo.
Taking a picture over there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Who's taking the picture?
I think I did that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, great.
We'll do Linda. There you go.
It's wonderful.
Your name? Congratulations again. I don't feel so small anymore.
Leave it there and you get to take it away afterwards. You get to put it on your mantle. And now I think,
That's it.
yeah,
I think I got to introduce Indira.
yeah.
Okay, and to lead these experts in discussion, please welcome Indira Naidoo-Harris. And I have the honor of introducing Indira, and I've had a personal friendship with her dating back to her days as a MPP, and I remember having this group of firefighters and many more working on her campaign in Milton, and it was a successful campaign, and we were thrilled to have you as an MPP. Indira is a champion of equity, diversity, and inclusion. She is an authority on women's issues, education, childcare, immigration, and media. Indira is a former Minister of Education in Ontario and former MPP at Queen's Park. Before that, she was a national journalist and broadcaster. She is currently the Associate Vice President at the University of Guelph and Vice Chair of the Pearson Center Board of Directors. Please join me in welcoming Indira.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction, and good evening, everyone. So wonderful to see such a fantastic room and so many old friends and some new friends, but a room filled with a lot of hope, I think, hard work, and folks that are really committed to our province, our country, and our community, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. It's especially important for us to be here today as we recognize 4 remarkable Canadians, labor leaders who have navigated through challenging times and serious obstacles to pave a strong path forward for our communities and for our workers in our country. Now, you all are trailblazers, no question. Each of you has been a strong voice for Canadians when it comes to equal opportunity, participation, fair wages, inclusion, healthcare, social justice, and so much more. So I want to start out by saying thank you. Thank you for all of your hard work over the years to make sure that you are building a strong Canada and a strong world for all of us. Now, I have to be honest. When I think about policy, I don't always think about labor leaders. The first thing I think about are politicians, I think about policy advisors, I think about researchers, and honestly, I don't always think about organized unions and the work that you do, organized labor. But you are on the front lines. You talk to your members every day, and you understand the challenges that they are facing in a real way. You have these conversations with people who are on the ground, and I realize that you know probably better than any of us what we need to do to help build the supports and foundation we need to build for people. So I'm going to start by asking each and every one of you about the vital role that you feel organized labor plays when it comes to shaping our policies for the future and progressive, positive policies. So I'm going to start with you, Dave. Tell me, what are your thoughts? How important is that role for union leaders to be playing?
Okay. I'm hoping this is on. I think that unions for decades have driven social change. They've dictated public policy. I like to believe that what gets negotiated at a bargaining table comes to a community shortly thereafter. I like to use the example that our friends at the Canadian Union of Postal Workers actually achieved maternity leave in 1981, and we forget where that came from. That came from a union, that came from a bargaining table. Ultimately, what it is that we pursue, at MAPSIO, for example, we're after hybrid work. That is going to have a huge policy impact on Ontario and on Canada. I think that we drive that conversation. In my case, my members literally write policy. And so they have keen ideas about what can improve the Ontario government, the Ontario economy, and so on. And I think that unions have to continue to be that catalyst.
Well, thank you for that. And maternity leave, I mean, that's a foundational building block to civil society as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for the work that your folks have been doing in this area. Renee, education, OECTA, I mean, so many things and so many challenges and so many needs on the ground, whether we're talking about children, parents, building the workforce of the future. What role do you feel that organized labor plays in all of this?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I was always attracted to sort of the union representation is because we have to look our members in the face. And all of us share, in Canada, I know when I grew up, sort of a shared respect and a dignity for work. Sometimes that's lost. And And it's best expressed in progressive management, wherever you see unions and labor working together, we usually get better results. In Ontario right now, we have a strained relationship. There is no communication, and I would argue that the kids are suffering. It is maybe not directly apparent to some people not in schools how badly some of those students who are suffering from COVID. The parents have struggled, the students have struggled, the teachers are still trying to adapt. All of the learning changes. Now with all of that, and there's been $1,500 per student cut from education since 2018, and that has resulted in lacking the resources that kids need, violence, and I want to make clear, violence is a form of communication. It means we didn't get to kids with the needs they had ahead of time, and their parents are frustrated as much as teachers might be in danger in school. So we have those issues, we need the resources. Class sizes when kids need to come back from learning COVID gaps and stuff. There's just a myriad of issues we're trying to deal with at a time when the government is actually withdrawing funds. And it's scary when I talk with some of those folks, and I've had a chance to talk to the minister, and I genuinely believe they don't really understand. Like there's not, sometimes people try and draw those things as malice or not. It is as simple as having dialogue. The more we talk, the more we understand each other, the more we respect each other. And if we talk about what's going on in schools, we can't let it continue because the kids are suffering.
So important, the points that you're bringing up, and a very key thing, that conversations work, but it's not just the conversations with your membership. You need to be able to talk to those folks that are in leadership positions in order to communicate to them what those needs are. And it sounds like some serious challenges on the ground when it comes to our schools in this province. Linda, Renee mentioned COVID, right? When I think about COVID, I think about healthcare, I think about all that work that happened during those years, and nurses were absolutely on the front line. And we're now having to deal with a lot of challenges and questions that people are asking us, and actually making us aware about what's happening in healthcare in this province, but also around the country. The needs are growing. Our electorate, the folks out there in our communities, are aging, and there's so much that we need to do in this area to make sure that we keep a robust position and a situation in place. So tell me, what are your thoughts about the role that your nurses union plays in this conversation in healthcare?
You see, when I listen to all the discussions on healthcare from the media to a politician, they talk about dollars. How much is it going to cost? Where are we going to get the money? Where's the money going to go? Who's going to be accountable for it? But when you have the union at the table, it's like a reality check. It's because healthcare, like education, like fire, like any of our public service, it's the workforce. And we find a way to stretch that dollar if we work together. So it's really a reality check when you have the workforce, the union at the table when you're establishing a policy. Because how many broken promises, how many broken policies we have across our great nation. And for my membership, just like any of you, I always say if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Yeah. And how often have we seen programs cut because the right person wasn't there to defend that program? So that's why we insist to be at all tables. I could go on COVID. You gave me about 10 questions. I'm French, female labor leader. You can imagine I could talk all day. But it's your turn, Sean.
Well, I don't,
Linda?
and I don't know if I'm going to get to 10 questions for you, Linda, but it's encouraging to know you're up for it if we want to do that. Sean, I mean, we're hearing about housing, we're hearing about all kinds of things these days, and certainly your union is on the front line when it comes to meeting some of those demands, whether it's building schools, whether it's building houses, affordable housing, and so on. So tell me, what are you hearing from your members, and what are the conversations that you feel we need to have when it comes to policy in this area?
Well, thanks very much.
Folks are hurting when it comes to these kinds of
Well, thanks very much, Indira, and thanks to the Pearson Center for this recognition, and congratulations to all my colleagues for the recognition here this evening as well. And Linda, as always, you're a tough act to follow. I really appreciate Linda's energy, and we sit on a couple of different committees where we work together in Ottawa. I think, you know, the question about unions driving social change, That's our history. We've been driving social change and progressive public policy since unions were formed. That's why unions exist, is to change working conditions for workers. And you can go back to the Winnipeg General Strike. When you think about it, unions gave us the weekend, right? And, people say that, glibly, but it's true. Like, we used to work 6 days a week and Sunday maybe half a day, during the Industrial Revolution. And so workers' rights, health and safety. WSIB came to be in Canada because, in Ontario particularly, is because employers were paying too much money in lawsuits to people who were getting injured on the job.
Yeah.
So they found a mechanism with the support of unions to try and find ways in which they can co-share that risk and improve health and safety for workers. And thankfully, we still have a lot of work to do in construction, but thankfully health and safety has really improved right across the country, but not in all regions. Health and safety for construction workers in Ontario is probably leads the pack across the country, but there are some regions where their health and safety numbers still require us to go to fight every day for proper health and safety for our workers. And so we've been driving social change for a long time. In terms of the issues that our members are facing, and I think it'd be similar, you all heard it before, it's pocketbook issues, it's the cost of living, it's inflationary pressures, it's mortgage payments. Last year in Ontario, we had several strikes, and the strikes it was really an anomaly because the union leadership in all cases, and I can't remember how many there was more than 6 of them, but in all cases, the union leadership recommended that we ratified and we settled. But the membership came back and said, no, it's not enough money. It's costing me $150 now to fill up my truck.
Yep.
The grocery bill is way more than it was before. And so I think you're going to continue to see this because for the last number of years, unions in my industry have been negotiating settlements around the rate of inflation. So we haven't been making any kind of headway. And when you look at the median wage of workers today, they're no further ahead than they were in the 1970s, for crying out loud. So the buying power of the average Canadian, the average working Canadian, is equal to what it was in the late 1970s.
Butter costs $8 or $9 a pound right now in some places, right? Butter.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so yes, exactly. So this is the challenge that we're facing in terms of kind of, righting that imbalance that has existed for a long time. And that's why I think you're starting to see more labor disruptions, and you're seeing more workers saying enough's enough. You have the longshoremen strike in the U.S., you have the longshoremen strike in B.C., longshoremen in Montreal. We have all kinds of different labor actions and job actions happening because workers are saying now it's time for us to get a bigger piece of that pie.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very legitimate case that our workers are making.
So I have to ask you, you're talking about having to be a strong voice for your membership, and it's clear that there are a lot of issues on the table. And we all know it's not easy work, right? At the end of the day, you are out there and you're involved with a lot of disputes and disagreements and negotiations, and you're really having to navigate through some very difficult conversations on a daily basis sometimes. So why do it? All of you have chosen this path for a reason, I think, because public service in whatever form it takes, it demands a lot of you. So I'd love it if just jump in and tell me, when did you come to realize that this was something you wanted to devote your life to?
Maybe I'll jump in first and suggest that it's not a path that anybody chooses. I think it's a path that finds you. You're either the most radical or the most level-headed person in your workplace, one or the other, and other people come to you and they want you to be their advocate. I come from a small community in Eastern Ontario where good jobs are at a premium. And so why this calls me is because protecting good jobs is just so important. If I asked everybody in the room right now, do you have house insurance, car insurance, life insurance? Do you have insurance for all the things in your life that matter? Unless you have a union, you don't have one for your livelihood. I am your livelihood insurance. AMAPSIO is your livelihood insurance for the people that we represent. And without us, everything that you enjoy in your life, everything that you provide for your family, everything that your community gets from you and your income would not be there. It is that critical. And so standing up for workers, and I have the privilege to stand up for white-collar knowledge workers, not the more traditional workers, if you will, from a unionized perspective, it matters. It has a huge impact on our society to have good jobs. And if we allow good jobs to disappear, then all of us up here have failed.
Yeah. Very good answer. Renee, how about you?
Well, it's interesting. I think to a certain extent, you're right. It kind of comes to you. I didn't expect to be where I am today when I started teaching, that's for sure. But I know what the interesting part of that journey probably is. When I grew up in the 60s, my parents were very generous and caring. We had immigrant families come and live in our home several times. People in the neighborhood looked out for each other, and you kind of had that. And then that led me to teaching. And when I work with teachers, I always like to use the expression, teachers, your work is like built on hope and optimism. It's not like if I do carpentry, and I used to do construction stuff, you get to see what you did at the end of the day, and you don't. So teachers work one day, one class, one child at a time with a hope for the future. So there's hope and optimism. And when I saw that challenged in the 90s as a teacher, I finally got to the point where I said, I can't stand by and let people outside the classroom do this to my colleagues and the students. I knew I couldn't last that career that was going to form. I decided to get involved with the union to shape the future. And that's what unions are doing. They're looking ahead. And Sean makes the point, when you talk about pregnancy leave, or you talk about weekends, or you talk about the things that we have, people imagined better.
Yeah.
And we need that more than ever. Unions are about saying, Ontario is better than this. And that doesn't matter what government's in. At any time, I have never at one point said, we're a done piece of work and I'm satisfied. And if that is who you are, you kind of just drift. People say, we need you to speak out for us. And you want to carry it forward for those people because that's what they want. And it doesn't matter which union leader you are. That's why I feel so lucky to work with union leaders, because it's all the same thing, right?
So you're saying you're dreamers, essentially, and you believe in, you have hope for the future, and you take that responsibility upon yourselves to try to make a world that you feel is possible. So you see the possibilities after you talk to the memberships and the folks in your area. Linda, tell me, healthcare.
Well, I'll disagree a little bit when my brother's here. We run for these positions. They're all elected positions. My son used to tell me all the time, stop complaining, Mom. You ran. I saw the posters. You ran for this. And I've been doing it since the age of 29 as a single mom. I was telling Howard over there, everyone knows Howard, the biggest lobbyist. He already has me signed up for stuff I don't even know about. But anyway, I got elected at 29, had a 13-month-old baby, and Frank McKenna was Premier of New Brunswick. Frank McKenna was very popular. I know I'm old, René? But Frank McKenna was, amazing premier, but no opposition at all. So you're 29 years old and you're called by CBC the official opposition of healthcare. And at the 1990s, the nurses, no jobs. They were all going to the States. They were leaving. And we had to fight that all the time. So it is about seeing a light at the end of the tunnel and transforming that anger, because I agree, it doesn't matter if it is the building trades or education or nursing, they're angry out there. Yeah. Alberta's voting on an excellent collective agreement. Today I'll get the result when I open my phone. I expect they will be rejecting it because they're just angry. So our job is to turn it around, but we run for these positions. Yeah. And I got a Conservative MP at a committee just recently when we were testifying for pharmacare, and he says, my wife is a nurse. I guess I could say this in this room, but my wife is a nurse. She doesn't believe in anything you say about pharmacare, blah, blah, blah. And I had to remind him that I got elected 10 times to represent nurses like his wife. So maybe I know what I'm talking about here, But it is election.
Yeah, well, we think you know what you're talking about for sure. Sean, a tough job, you know. Why do it?
Well, it's an honor for me to go to work every day and represent the 14 different construction unions and 60 different trades and 600,000 members across the country from coast to coast. And there's a few of our affiliates in the room here today, and we got a very busy team who's here from CB2's office as well. It's just an honor to go and make what one former U.S. politician said, and that's make good trouble. And there's problems and there's challenges, and you wake up on a Monday and you think your week's going to go one way and it goes another way, and you just have to deal with it and trying to find a way through it, fix the day-to-day, the problems, but always keep an eye on the future. Yeah. What is it you're working for? It's called a union movement for a reason, because we're trying to move social dialogue, we're trying to affect change, we're trying to make people's lives better. And in that path of making good trouble, you're going to have some obstacles. So you're going to have to deal with those obstacles and keep your eye on that long game. And for me, you may have heard in my bio, like I came from a construction union household. My grandfather was a bricklayer. My dad was a bricklayer. And in the 70s, your parents said to you, like, Sean, you're going to work on Monday, right? It's like no choice. In the summer, I was very young, and I went to work. And so that kind of experience that I've had throughout my life, and I've done various things, but that kind of experience I had going to work and working off the sweat of my brow and working alongside fellow tradesmen is absolutely irreplaceable. And that's what reminds me when I go to work and represent these people every day. That's what motivates me.
Well, thank you for that. You mentioned obstacles, so I'm going to just throw this out there. Linda or Renee or any of you, tell me about one of the biggest obstacles that you have faced in your work, and how did you overcome it? Just a brief example of something where you thought, there's no way I can figure this out and get past it, and yet magically you were able to come up with a solution and really a policy idea that worked.
Well, probably the obstacle is to try to convince nurses that it is not women's work. And never mind policies, I can't stand it when you call us angels of mercies and all that. I give speeches to nurses. That halo on your head and those wings, clip them now. You are a healthcare professional and a hardworking worker. So it is important to do that. And that's been, for 30 years I've been doing this, 30 years the same speech, and I still hit the same obstacle of, well, you're really doing women's work. You're there to care. And I'll give you an example of, in French, infirmière used to be garde malade, which was garde, watch the sick. And it's as old as that. So that's been the biggest obstacle. The worst thing that ever happened was COVID. Mm-hmm. When H1N1, Toronto was hit with SARS, big commission, H1N1 hit, we were getting ready. We thought H1N1 was the big one. We had committee, I was on every news outlet and saying, if you don't provide PPEs to nurses, we will do a general walkout. I was like bluffing up that. So there's no way, I didn't even have the mandate to do that. But we got the policies. And then when COVID happened, I came back from my honeymoon, met the federal health minister, and Patty said, Linda, what do you think's going to happen? I said, no, we're ready. The policies are written from Newfoundland and Labrador to BC. They're ready, we're ready. And over one weekend in this city, politicians and policymaker changed the policy. So when I say you're not at the table, you're on the menu, that's what happened. And the policies across the country change, where nurses in long-term care and acute care, the PPEs were hidden. I had members of your union, that's before your time, calling me, Linda, we have PPEs, our shops are closed, what do you want me to do? And I said, please don't give them to government. Please give them to your local nursing home, give them to your local hospital. And that's how some of them got the information, got the policies. and not the policies, the PPEs. So, you know, it's how do you continue on pushing the agenda? But if you're not at that table, they're going to forget about you.
You're also saying that sometimes you have to be innovative, right? You're faced with an issue or a challenge, and you have to kind of figure out how to navigate through things, whether or not you're going to get the support you're looking for.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's that, it's a little bit of sugar and a little bit of push. You have to be a badass sometime. And, you know, during H1N1, I had to be that badass. But we got the policies. And it was literally amazing policy led by Ontario Health. It was amazing. But that weekend, everything changed. But we were all in a panic stage. Yep. And what happened, you know? And one day somebody will find what happened that weekend. And we'll write about it for sure. I challenge all of you from Ontario.
Anyone else have a quick story they want to relate? Renee, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sure. I want to pick up on that one. It is interesting. Teaching is very similar. It's a primarily female profession. It's interesting when you're bargaining. Well, just do it for the kids. Like, they should just be moms and do it for free or something. It's an interesting, and it's hard to convince because teachers are like that. Many of and then the men as well, and they are giving, and so that's a hard argument to tell them, no, your work is worthwhile. And our care industries, it doesn't matter what care, whether it's personal service workers, old elder care, whether schools, nursing, they all have that kind of challenge. But the one example, and there was one that really, it was distressing, that was COVID. I want to mention that. So when we went into COVID, we couldn't get a seat at the table. We had all kinds of ideas about how to do things better. Something as simple as you have to teach everybody how to do this differently. And you have to redo all your courses. So what we're going to do is we're going to let every single teacher in Ontario recreate their courses on their own. As it was happening, you're saying, let's spend the summer, let's bring in teachers, let's do curriculum writing, and we can create packages for people to have. Doesn't that make sense? We couldn't even get a hearing. So teachers individually had to do that struggle on their own in the midst of being in boards that were underfunded, didn't have the technology. When they had the technology, didn't have the technology support, and we couldn't do anything about it. We were banging down the door, but we couldn't be at the table. And so that's one of the most distressing pieces. When I was involved, that we couldn't get someone to hear some common sense was, it bothers me because the teachers suffered unnecessarily, and because they suffered, the students did, and because they were all suffering, it made it harder on every single parent, because every single one of us struggled in COVID, and parents were trying their best, and they were at a loss, and we couldn't support them more at a time when we would have wanted to, because we were just drawn to our wits' end.
Absolutely, and as you pointed out, teachers were dealing with their own families and their own demands during those situations too, and trying to make sure that they were building, creating the support that folks needed and that students needed. So we're talking about challenging times, we're talking about obstacles. These are troubling times. I think you would all agree. We've been through a lot of different things over the last few years. You know, there are some issues right now. We've talked about affordability. That's a huge one. Whether we're talking about affordability in terms of food, in terms of housing, in terms of health care, and not affordability, but being able to get the services and the help you need. So I want to find out from you, we're talking about policy and the future, and making sure we're building good, sound policy to create successful communities in our province and in our country. What do you folks think right now is one of the biggest issues facing unions and governments that we need to pay more attention to? Sean, I see you.
Well, one of the big challenges we have is because our members are going to be adversely affected in terms of potential job loss, and that is the drive to a net zero-based carbon economy by 2050. And so we're already seeing in Alberta, there's hardly any investment in new oil and gas, and we still have a lot of people hours for maintenance of the big oil upgraders, et cetera. But as we transition to a net zero carbon-based economy, we're going to lose some of those traditional jobs in oil and gas. And so how do we manage that transition? And there's going to be some bumps along the way. We need sophisticated labor market data, so we need to know, where we're going to lose the jobs, when are the new energy sources of the future coming on? Is hydrogen really going to happen? Are small modular reactors really going to happen outside of Ontario? Are wind turbines coming back? Are we having more solar? Like, how are we going to plan this transition?
Yeah.
Because if we don't plan it right, we run the risk of losing a generation of tradespeople, because if there isn't a job there
Yeah.
and they get laid off, they're going to go out and try to find something else to do. So this is
And
a...
we
this-
all lose. We all lose as a country when that happens.
we all lose. And so, you know, we're having some headwinds around EV battery plants, which are employing and intend to employ many of our members. But what's that going to look like in terms of equipment installation? And are we going to be able to maximize Canadian jobs? And so we're fighting the good fight on these kinds of files to make sure as we transition to this net zero economy. And we support that. My Canadian Executive Board is supportive of this transition to a net zero carbon-based economy by 2050. But the question is, how are we going to get there? Is there going to be regulatory efficiency? Pathways Alliance wants to spend $28 billion in carbon sequestration in Alberta. Are we going to be able to make that deal so we can continue the life of the oil sands for another 50 years and employ people? So these are big, big questions that, if not handled right, are really going to impact a lot of unionized construction workers and construction workers generally in Canada. And so this is what we're really working on right now.
Dave, I'm going to go to you, and I'm going to just kind of direct you a little bit. What about AI? Everybody's talking about it. You know, various organizations are using different versions of what's out there right now. How is AI going to be affecting policy, our workforce, and the decisions that we need to make? What do we need to know now?
I think AI is already here, and it's been here for a while, and we're not ready for it. I know in the provincial government, there's a lot of thought going into it, but it's kind of after the fact. From somebody who represents workers, obviously we need to make sure that we protect good jobs. We need to make sure that we don't stifle innovation at the same time. There will be AI benefits that will come to many sectors. We need to make sure that there's good policy, because policy is the throttle. Policy is how we speed up and slow down and make sure that nobody gets left behind, that we do things right. And I don't think that we have any governments, whether it's federal or provincial, that are mindful of that at the moment. I think they're just all coming along, following downstream with what's taking place. They're playing catch up with it. We have in the provincial government right now no access to outside AI. That's a good thing. The reason that it's a good thing is because nobody has given thought to what information it could be damaging or harmful, or if it's shared and so on. But that thought should have occurred 5 or 10 years ago. I'll share what is one of my common laments. I represent what used to be the proud civil service. People who were actually hired for their ideas and the things that they could provide to politicians who were quite simply the most popular person in their community. They were never subject matter experts. And for the last 15 years, we've had populist governments who bring in their own ideas and then try to have us fit policy to suit what it is that they're trying to drive. Mm-hmm. AI is something that's coming at us. Hybrid work is something that's here and that is huge for knowledge workers and office workers. And we're behind, Indira. We need to catch up on policy.
So are you saying it's a bit of the Wild West out there when it comes to AI and the guidelines and the structure that we need in order to be able to actually deal with this? And
absolutely. That's my experience. People are catching up with it. The majority of people I run into have no idea what it is. I don't think they could go home and describe it to a family member. A lot of us in this room are probably daunted by it and don't know exactly what it is and what it means, but it's around us. It's all around us, and we need to make sure that we are thoughtful, come at it from a what do we need to protect, right? In healthcare, we can't have people's health information flying all over the place. Education, similar. And we need to make sure that those protections are there, and there is time to be thoughtful, but we need to be focused to do that.
I'm going to go to you, Renee. You mentioned the word care when you talked about the fact that teachers care, educators care about their students, their communities, and building good, solid human beings and workers in order to be able to accomplish the things we need to do. So tell me, a care economy, There's a lot of talk about that right now, and I know that a lot of organized labor is saying we need to pay more attention to the notion of a care economy. What do you think?
Yeah, well, that's a really interesting point of view. And earlier I referred back to when I grew up in the 60s, and
Yeah.
we all looked out for each other. There's kind of, it's still there, but I think your observation that policy has become so short-term. It's not a party, it's every government. We have this challenge that together we don't sit down and say, what is it we have in common? So we're stuck in these things that separate us, and it distracts us from the stuff. And if we talk about should people be able to retire in dignity, I don't care what party people are. Most people will say yes. Should we care for the elderly? Should we care for our children? Should people not have to go bankrupt if you get a bad knee, you're in construction and people lose their hips and knees, should they not be able to not go bankrupt for that? So there's these aspirational goals, and we need to revisit how we care for each other.
Yeah.
And that's in the conversation. We can't scream at each other from polarized positions.
No.
We need to find the middle ground, which is exactly where the conversation happens. And our challenge is we're in a world where people are trying to force us to far ends, so we scream at each other at a distance, and that doesn't allow us to care for each other. And the care economy will doesn't only produce good jobs, it makes our lives better. And I can see it, and it's not even my imagination. We've seen it in our lives, and we need to bring some of that
So you're
back.
saying we need it, but we need to make sure that we're letting people know it has to be a priority, because that is how we're going to build successful communities, successful businesses and organizations and so on, is by looking at the fact that we have to figure out how to get along with each other.
And that is structural and it's procedural. Where do you agree that we should all then sit down at a table? Should labor sit with bosses at a table and be talking about where are we going to be 30 years from now?
Yeah.
Because if we're not having that conversation, we're all going in different directions. The
Right.
way to get everyone in the same direction is being in the same room and having a conversation and finding where we want to be in common. We won't agree on everything, but the most fundamental things we will.
Thank you. Linda, I'm going to go to you, healthcare, and I think we should talk about mental health and mental wellness, because I know that there are a lot of folks out there in many different sectors who are feeling that they are challenged when it comes to finding that way to cope with the things that they're needing to cope with. And let's face it, we know that is happening with nurses. We know that the challenges and the stress of the job is really at times overwhelming for people. And we also know that nurses are leaving the profession because of it. I sit on a healthcare board, so this is a conversation we have often about how to make sure that we're keeping people happy and we're keeping them in the roles that they need to be in order to take care of folks. What's your observations?
You know, the good thing with the mental health explosion, because it has been an explosion, I guarantee you when I first graduated from nursing, we had a course in psychiatry, which wasn't mental health, was psychiatry, and then nothing else. But the explosion of mental health is a good thing because it means that people are safe, are confident to talk that they're not okay. The problem is there's not the services there.
Yeah.
Or do you actually need the services too? Because Renee gave me a great segue. One thing, I'm not worried about jobs. Healthcare will have jobs forever and ever. The problem with healthcare is we have to create the best jobs in our community should be in healthcare like they were when I graduated. I wanted a job at my local hospital. I'm still on the first page of seniority at that hospital. I was so proud to get that job. Now it's one of the worst. You know, so we're not worried about job, we're not worried about AI, it will happen, but we're worried about the fact that there's distrust in the system. There's distrust in decision makers, in leadership, and it's affecting the access to care. So it's affecting primary care. We're not taking care of each other. We're not seeing a nurse practitioner or a physician when we need to, just to stay healthy.
Right.
And we're not doing it for mental health too. But that sense of community we used to have is not there. And that is my biggest worry. And when I look at unions, but when I look at organization, when I look at activism, is how do we bring back that sense of community? Regardless if it's Toronto or Grand Barachois, where I'm from in New Brunswick.
So, final question, we're going to wrap it up just very quickly, your thoughts on this. You're talking about the fact that we're living in a world these days that's divided, right? Polarized, divided. People don't seem to be as happy with the work that they're doing, and they seem stressed. So do we need a new type of leadership? You know, we're talking about the kind of leadership we've had. Renee, you touched on what it used to be like and so on. Have we lost something, and is there a new approach that we should be looking at? I worked with a group at one point that talked about the notion that we need a more kinder, kind of thoughtful approach as we're dealing with things. So very quickly, what are your thoughts?
Wow, if I could solve that one, I'd be running for, higher office. Yeah, higher office, that's for sure. Yeah, I won't specify which. It really is interesting because the challenges we face are actually, I always try to find the opportunity in it. And that people feel there's something wrong, it's because the system hasn't been fair to average Canadians. And I don't want to pick on corporations because I'm not against wealth. But I think a lot of people are worried that there seems to be corporate greed when they see obscene profit stuff. They're saying, we have enough wealth to do better, all of us together. And so how do you have that conversation about what that looks like? Because I don't have the answer.
Right.
But if I talk with the little lady down the street, and I'm serious about that, some of the, I talked to the little lady down the street, she's like 90 years old, and I hear her say things of great wisdom. And if we sit down with each other, we all have those pieces of it. And that is it. It's about finding spaces to talk, but we also need to make places to do that. Currently, the current government is thinking about having a piece about moving forward jobs where labor will be part of the conversation.
Right.
It seems to me like that's not a crazy idea. That when labor and business work together, we get better solutions.
Yeah.
And so talking about structure where we create those opportunities, and it has to have the windows that are looking farther into the future.
Dave, I just want to make sure I'm giving you an opportunity. Advice. Well, what advice would you give political leaders today?
Stop being so polarized. I think we actually have to get involved in politics ourselves if we're going to right the ship. I think we follow what's happening in the United States, and in the last 5 years, it's come here to Canada. There's no more middle ground. Sean and I have to be on opposite sides of the stage. We can never meet in the middle. And if you are willing to use a different approach, and this is something that we do, where you try to come at something from a non-adversarial way, you're often thought of as being weak for having done that, when in fact that's how you actually, in an interest-based way, find a solution. So I don't know that we're ever going to, as Renee said, solve the problem, but politics is driving the issue at the moment, and it's gotten so hot in all of our legislatures that I was at the, and there's a lot of you from the province in the room. Why is it that there's only one MPP not being heckled at the Ontario legislature, Salma Makwa? Everybody else is being heckled. Once upon a time, that did not happen. People actually had respect and heard people out, and we've completely lost that ability to be empathetic and hear somebody else's opinion.
Got it. Sean.
Yeah, I think that this divisive nature of contemporary society has a lot to do with the contract with the middle class has been broken. And I touched on it earlier in terms of the lack of real wage growth, and through various government policies initiatives, like that gave rise to Trump in the U.S. The people just didn't feel like they were getting ahead. And we're seeing that similarly in Canada now with Pierre Poilievre and with Justin Trudeau. And I think the way forward is there. We're hearing more of it. You heard Joe Biden in the U.S., like the first time I've ever heard a president say unionize labor. We have politicians in Canada now who are saying unionize labor.
So you're saying not look at you as adversaries, but look at you as partners.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're recognizing that we're part of the solution.
Yeah.
And by getting us to the table, like what Renee and Dave and Linda are saying, by getting us at the table to have discussions with us about real issues that are facing Canadians,
Right.
and recognizing that, as union leaders, we don't have three heads Like we're like, you know, we're reasonable people. That I think that discussion that's happening now more and more is part of the solution. It's not going to be the whole solution, but having labor representatives at the table to help move forward on these very important policy initiatives,
Right.
I think is going to help, and it's going to help create more opportunities for the middle class and restore that contract that's been
Sure.
broken.
Thank you. Linda, I want to make sure I give you a chance. We're wrapping up now. I'm getting the signals that it's time to wrap
Yeah,
this up.
I saw Pam walking
Yes.
around too. But no, and I chuckled when you said that you're on the healthcare board and you talked about leadership and kindness. I just came back from Montreal. I'm flying after this to go back to another healthcare conference, and it's all about leadership and kindness. Be a leader and kind. And we're in the back saying, accountability, accountability. Like, you can be kind as you want, but if we can't trust what you're saying as a leader,
wow.
then what is it worth? So it's about being true to yourself
Yes.
and true to what you say. So you don't have to do the shopping list of promises, but do, and it's about that 15%, do what you can do and do it right.
So integrity is important.
Integrity and accountability, and it's so important. And I do have hope in our country. I do have hope because there's great people like in this room, like this organization. I was stunned. It just started, 12 years ago you mentioned? I thought it was longer than that. But we need more of these think tanks to shake the cage. Because if not, it'll be lifetime politicians that will continue on and on and on and on and on.
Well, you all have
Like
shaken the
union
cage a
leaders that
little
go
bit
on
today.
and on and on. But
So
thank you.
thank you very much, and I hope we didn't go on too long for you all. It's been a pleasure talking with all of you, really, and thank you so much for sharing your insight, some of your experiences, and really your thoughtful advice about what we need to do to figure out the future and build a strong future for Ontarians and Canadians. Really, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on your awards.
Oh, yes, keep the applause going. It's great. We can bring them to you. Thank you, Indira, for moderating such a great panel. A big thank you and congratulations to Dave, to Renee, to Linda and Sean, and my very small special message to Linda especially, tu es très féroce. Merci, merci pour 30 ans d'engagement. Thank you so much for your commitment to nursing, being the woman on the panel and talking about the importance of accountability. Thank you all very much. I'll turn it over to Carmen to help us end the evening.
And to end this wonderful evening, I'd like to call on Kevin Bosch to offer closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Carmen and Marva, for co-chairing our dinner. And thank you to Indira for returning to your role as broadcast journalist and interviewing our panel here tonight. Massive thank you to all our partners and everyone who brought individual tickets. Your participation greatly helps us work toward good public policy in Canada. Please, let's give a round of applause to all the volunteers who put on this event. Thank you. Let me single out Pam Gutteridge. I'm not sure where she is right now, but our lead organizer. Incredible job, Pam. Thank you. And thank you very much to our panelists who did an incredible discussion, incredible job. Linda, I don't know if you're available to run for Prime Minister, but I'm definitely interested, so let's talk. And thank you for everyone who gathered here tonight. Your support has been very invaluable for us. If you'd like to be on our mailing list to get updates or webinars, podcasts, other projects throughout the year, please add your name to the contact details sign-up sheet on your table or send us an email. Thank you very much to everyone. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you. you.